Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with the stroke of a pen, 49 years ago today, several weeks after I finished high school, then President Lyndon Johnson signed into law two of the largest and most important health-related programs the country had ever seen, Medicare and Medicaid. Those programs were created nearly half a century ago because our nation's leaders saw time and time again the hopelessness of people who had no way to provide the most basic level of health care for themselves and their families. It was President Harry Truman who initially conceived of a health care safety net for struggling Americans. Nearly 70 years ago, Truman said, "Millions of our citizens do not now enjoy good health. Millions do not have security against the economic effects of sickness, and the time has arrived for action to help them get that protection." End of quote. Since the creation of Medicare and Medicaid, no achievement has been as significant and consequential as the Affordable Care Act. In addition to providing affordable health insurance to some for the first time ever, the ACA has also provided for significant expansion of states' Medicaid programs so that individuals with incomes less than 138% of the poverty level could finally have access to basic care. A Supreme Court case would make Medicaid expansion voluntary. Now, nearly half a century after Medicaid was created to help the least among us, 24 states in this country, 24 states believe it best to disenfranchise millions and deny them access to federal dollars they rightfully deserve by not expanding their program. States that have refused to expand point to the increased cost as a main reason for their decision. But, Mr. Speaker, the federal government has committed to pay 100%. That's 100% of the cost of expansion for the first 3 years, and then 90% beyond the first 3. Nationally, the states would see only a 1.6% increase in their share of Medicaid spending, a 1.6% increase to provide health care for millions of deserving individuals. The benefits of expansion far outweigh the cost. In my home state of North Carolina alone, expanding Medicaid will save the state more than $65 million over the next 8 years and would benefit its economy by adding nearly $1.5 billion to the state's revenue. It would not only help to save jobs, but help to create them too. That's just in North Carolina. And this same scenario is playing out in nearly half of all the states in our country. The cost of not expanding is simply too great. Pungo Hospital, located just outside of my congressional district in Belhaven, has closed its doors because North Carolina refuses to expand Medicaid. The decision by Governor Pat McCrory and the Republican-led state legislature has cost a woman her life. Portia Gibbs was 48 years old. She had a heart attack and died on her way to the nearest open hospital, which was an hour away. Providing care to the sick and injured is a moral imperative that Harry Truman saw nearly 70 years ago when he first spoke about it. Congress and President Lyndon Johnson believed caring for the least among us was a moral necessity when Medicare and Medicaid was passed and signed into law. At the signing ceremony 49 years ago, former President Harry Truman said of the people that would benefit from Medicare and Medicaid, quote, "These people are ability, and they are entitled, among other benefits, to the best medical protection available. We don't want them to have any idea of hopeless despair." End of quote. That was President Harry Truman. In response to Truman, President Lyndon Johnson said, "Improving the health of all Americans calls upon us never to be indifferent to despair. It commands us never to turn away from helplessness. It directs us never to ignore or to spurn those who suffer untended in a land that is bursting with abundance. Those elected officials standing in the way of Medicaid expansion should simply reflect on President Johnson's words. In a country that has come so far, Americans who struggle financially deserve better than that. They deserve better than to have their elected officials tell them that their worth in this world is tied to their ability to afford health insurance. I thank you for the time, Mr. Speaker, this morning. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back.